Act 1 Setup and Silent Servitude. Scene 1 Morning Routine Invisible Burden. Interior living room. Soft morning light filters through sheer curtains. Dust motes float lazily in the sunbeams. Margaret, in her late 40s, moves with mechanical precision, folding laundry on the small table. Her jaw is tight, her shoulders tense, her eyes focused on the task, but the fatigue beneath the surface is palpable. For 5 long years, I existed in the shadows of my own home. My days were measured not by laughter or love or acknowledgement, but by chores, schedules, and invisible labor. Every folded shirt, every polished plate, every tidy corner was a quiet plea for recognition. And yet, the silence around me never answered. Margaret folds the last shirt and sets it aside. Tiffany lounges on the sofa in the corner, scrolling her phone, sipping a latte she didn't make herself. Kevin sits at the dining table, distracted by emails, occasionally glancing at the kitchen, but never really seeing her. They move through the house like it belonged to them, unaware or unwilling to notice. The woman who held it together, who kept it clean, who fed them. I was a ghost in my own life. Medium close-up on Margaret's hands, then a slow pan upward to her face. The camera lingers on a fleeting expression, a mix of weariness, suppressed anger, and quiet determination. Scene 2. The kitchen's silent frustration. Interior kitchen. Cold, muted tones dominate the space. Breakfast is being prepared by Margaret. Eggs fried to perfection, toast perfectly browned, coffee steaming in neat cups. Tiffany remains on the bar stool, scrolling, texting, occasionally sipping. Kevin is halfway through breakfast, distracted by his laptop. The kitchen was a stage. I performed every morning, a silent actor in a play no one cared to watch. I plated their meals, polished their mugs, and cleaned as if I were invisible, because perhaps in their eyes, that was exactly what I was. Over-the-shoulder shots show Margaret chopping vegetables, stirring pots, arranging plates. Her movements are precise, but her face tells another story. The frustration she cannot voice, the resentment she cannot release. Micro-expressions. A flicker of a frown, a tense jaw, a tightened grip on the knife handle. POV shot from Margaret's perspective. Tiffany's smirk at a social media post, Kevin barely noticing the burnt toast he didn't care about. The contrast between their obliviousness and her silent suffering is palpable. They laughed, they scrolled, they talked about their trivial problems, while I carried the weight of the house, the invisible labor, the constant, thankless service. And every day, the silence screamed louder than any word. Scene 3. Laundry and loneliness. Living room again. Margaret folds laundry, placing each item neatly in piles. Dust motes shimmer in the morning sun. A clock ticks quietly in the background. The camera lingers on subtle gestures. A hand smoothing wrinkles, a shoulder slump, a quiet sigh escaping, lips pressed together. I tried to disappear into my work, to find solace in the order I could create, in the folds of a shirt, the shine of a countertop, the empty perfection of a clean floor. But every crease, every speck of dust, reminded me of what I was missing. Recognition, respect, love, a voice telling me I mattered. Margaret pauses, folding a sweater slowly, her eyes distant, almost haunted. Her mind drifts to memories of earlier years, moments when she felt seen, when family life wasn't just about survival and servitude. I remembered who I was before I became invisible, before I became the caretaker of others' happiness, while my own was ignored. And yet I endured, because I had to, because I had no choice, or so I thought. Scene 4. Tiffany's subtle cruelty. Interior dining area. Tiffany begins demanding things, a specific mug, an extra napkin, her phone charger. Kevin barely notices the tension rising, absorbed in his laptop. Margaret silently obeys, fetching and arranging items with a forced calm. Tiffany never raised her voice, never screamed. She didn't need to. Her cruelty was quiet, insidious, woven into every look, every command, every assumption that I existed only to serve. And Kevin, he was blind to it. Or perhaps he chose to be. Close-up of Tiffany's smirk as she scrolls. Margaret's face tightens, lips pressed, jaw clenched, but her hands remain steady. The tension between desire for rebellion and enforced obedience is tangible. They didn't know I was watching. They didn't know I was thinking, planning, waiting. And that was my secret advantage. Scene 5. Kevin's oblivion. Kevin fumbles with a grocery list, spilling cereal onto the counter. He mutters complaints about the brand being wrong. Margaret silently wipes the counter, her eyes lingering on him. The camera captures her expression from over the shoulder, showing suppressed irritation. Kevin couldn't see me because he didn't want to. He couldn't see me because it was easier to ignore the person keeping his life together. 5 years of doing everything unnoticed. And yet, silently, the fire within me grew. A quiet reckoning that was only just beginning. The camera lingers on Margaret's hands, folding the final napkin with deliberate care. Close up on her eyes, a spark of determination, the first hint of a plan forming. Scene 6. Evening reflection. Interior evening. Margaret sits alone in the dimly lit living room, soft lamplight casting shadows across her face. Snow falls lightly outside. She sips tea, staring at a blank wall, mind racing. Micro-expressions. A subtle smirk, eyes narrowing, jaw set. Some nights, the weight of 5 years pressed against me like a storm. But storms pass. And in the quiet, I began to see clarity. The rules of this house, the power dynamics, the invisible chains that bound me, and how easily they could be broken. Close up. Margaret's hand taps lightly on the table, almost rhythmically. POV of snowy yard outside, a metaphor for purity, fresh beginnings, and the possibility of liberation. And in that silence, I began to plan. Slowly, carefully, patiently. Every move, every piece of evidence, every tiny leverage point. I would use it all. And this time, I would be seen. I would be heard. And I would take back everything. Act 2. Discovery and Strategic Planning. Scene 1. The Office Revelation. Interior. Home office dimly lit. Desk lamp casts warm, focused light across Margaret's face and laptop. The rest of the room fades into shadows. Papers and folders are scattered across the desk, some slightly crumpled from prior investigations. A faint sound of snow scraping against the window outside adds a soft tension. It started as a curiosity, a small question that refused to leave my mind. Why were bills unpaid? Why had credit accounts exploded in Tiffany's name? And then, the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. Lies, debts, fraudulent loans, hidden expenses, all meticulously hidden, yet carelessly executed enough that I could trace them. 5 years of control, 5 years of manipulation, all laid bare. Camera. Over-the-shoulder shot of laptop screen showing spreadsheets, highlighted transactions in red, bank statements with unfamiliar charges. Close-ups on Margaret's eyes widening, lips pressing together, a subtle jaw clenching as the realization sinks in. For the first time in years, I was not just observing. I was seeing. Every sneer, every command, every invisible shove they had given me suddenly made sense. And I felt a fire I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, exactly. It was clarity. The kind that comes before action. Scene 2. Processing the betrayal. Interior, living room. Margaret sits quietly, sipping tea. Snow continues to fall outside, faintly covering the garden. The camera captures micro-expressions. Subtle hand tremor, tense jaw, deep exhale. She picks up a photo frame of her family, glances at Kevin, Tiffany, and herself. The realization wasn't just financial. It was emotional, spiritual. It was a betrayal of the very life I had built. 5 years of invisible labor, 5 years of being treated like a shadow. And all of it had been exploited. They weren't just ungrateful. They were deliberate. Calculated. And this could not stand. Cut to POV shot of Margaret's hand opening a folder labeled, Tiffany, Financial Records. Camera zooms in on highlighted debts, credit misuse, fraudulent loans. The shadows of the room cast long lines across her determined face. I remembered my own strength, the woman I used to be. And I realized something else. The power to change everything was in my hands. Scene 3. Planning the escape. Interior, hotel lobby and suite. Margaret arranges luggage carefully, checks the balcony view with the ocean sparkling in the morning sun. Her phone lies face down, notifications stacking silently. She checks room service menus, makes notes, and organizes her schedule. I needed distance. I needed calm. I needed clarity. And so I escaped, not in fear, but in strategy. Every email, every phone call, every document I prepared would have maximum impact. I would observe the chaos, not be caught in it. I would strike silently, surgically, and without remorse. Camera. Medium shot of Margaret's serene face, POV from balcony capturing cityscape and horizon. Close-up of phone notifications piling up, emails, messages, reminders but ignored. Slow dolly pan across room, showing organized, strategic preparation. I wasn't running. I was preparing. And when the time came, they would see just how invisible I had been. Until then, I watched. I waited. I planned. Scene 4. Contacting allies. Interior. Hotel business center, minimalistic, modern. Margaret sits at a polished desk with laptop open. She begins sending emails and messages to Alejandro, Valeria, Marco, and Evelyn, highlighting Tiffany's fraudulent activity and debts. Her face is calm, confident, almost serene. The camera lingers on the reflection of her eyes in the laptop screen. 5 years of servitude had taught me one thing. Details matter. Proof matters. Timing matters. And allies, even reluctant ones, could turn the tide. I sent my evidence carefully, highlighting every indiscretion, every deception. I watched their responses carefully, measuring fear, guilt, hesitation. And I smiled. Slowly. Methodically. Victory is born in patience. Close-up of laptop screen. Highlighted financial statements, email confirmations sent, timestamps of strategic actions. Medium shot. Margaret leans back, hands folded, calm and in control. The room's soft lighting emphasizes shadows and contours on her face, suggesting power emerging from subtlety. They thought they were untouchable, invincible, and they were about to learn how fragile that illusion could be. Scene 5. Visualization of the coming chaos. Interior. Margaret's hotel room at night. City lights shimmer through the window. Snow drifts past slowly. She sits quietly, reviewing the emails she sent, making notes on a legal pad. A glass of wine rests untouched. She breathes slowly, eyes distant, almost contemplative. I imagined the chaos before it arrived. Tiffany panicking in the kitchen, Kevin fumbling over groceries, the family scrambling to organize, while I watched from above, calm, untouched, untouchable. Every move I had made, every calculation, every silent hour of research, it was all leading to this moment. And in my mind, I smiled at their impending disarray. Camera. POV from window, snow softly falling. Top-down shot of the hotel room, papers neatly aligned, laptop glowing. Close-up of Margaret's face. Calm, collected, a subtle smirk forming as her plan solidifies. For 5 years I had served. For 5 years I had endured. But now, the power had shifted. And nothing would ever be the same. Scene 6. Preparing the first moves. Interior. Various shots of Margaret making preparations. Copying documents, organizing files, ensuring every piece of evidence is precise. She sets up automated emails, digital reminders, and backup copies of every transaction. Camera cuts between close-ups of her hands, the documents, and her determined face. The first moves are always the hardest. But once they're executed, the rest is inevitable. I was ready to reclaim what had been mine. Slowly, carefully, decisively. Every document, every email, every note would hit with precision. And I would watch from the calm before the storm. Camera. Close-up of her hand tapping the send button on an email. Medium shot of Margaret leaning back, satisfied. Reflection of city lights in her eyes, symbolizing the vast network of influence she is about to unleash. The chessboard was set. The pieces were moving. And I finally was no longer invisible. Act 3. Chaos and psychological warfare. Scene 1. The first signs of panic. Interior. Family kitchen, late morning. Natural daylight streams through the window, slightly harsh, highlighting the chaos. Grocery bags are scattered across the counter, some items spilled onto the floor. Tiffany paces nervously, her phone in one hand, a panicked expression on her face. Kevin is crouched near the pantry, looking over receipts, muttering incoherently about missing funds. They thought they were in control. that their world was safe, ordered, untouchable. But control is an illusion, and illusions crumble when exposed. It started small. Tiffany's hesitation, Kevin's confusion, but the ripple would soon become a tidal wave. Camera. Wide establishing shot of the kitchen, split-screen effect showing Tiffany flailing while Kevin scrambles. Close-ups on frantic hands, spilled cereal, and overturned cups. Margaret's presence looms silently in her mind's eye, unseen but omnipotent. 5 years of invisibility had taught me patience. 5 years of servitude had taught me strategy. And now, I watched the storm I had quietly unleashed. Scene 2. Remote observation. Interior. Hotel suite, Margaret at a polished desk. Laptop open with live responses from emails and financial notifications. Her calm face reflects in the screen as she monitors the family's growing panic. The beauty of distance is clarity. From here, I could see the unraveling without being tangled in it. Every frantic call, every missed payment, every question without an answer. It was proof. Proof that they were finally paying attention. Proof that power, once taken for granted, can be lost. Close-up of laptop screen. Incoming messages from Alejandro, Valeria, and Marco acknowledging Tiffany's misdeeds. Margaret types brief, precise replies, strategic and calculating. POV shot shows her serene gaze as the chaos unfolds thousands of miles away. Narration. I didn't gloat. Not yet. The moment of triumph is sweeter when it is patient, when it builds with every heartbeat of suspense. And the moment was almost here. Scene 3. Tiffany's frantic measures. Interior. Family living room. Tiffany tries to call every creditor, checking accounts, scanning paperwork. Kevin shuffles documents, sweating, his normally composed demeanor replaced with panic. The camera lingers on Tiffany's face. Wide eyes, forced breaths, trembling lips. Kevin's jaw tightens as realization creeps in. They were scrambling. They couldn't see me, couldn't understand the scope of what they had unleashed. But I could. And I smiled quietly to myself, because chaos is the clearest form of justice. Close-up. Spilled receipts, abandoned credit cards on the counter. Over-the-shoulder shots of Tiffany typing emails, her hands shaking. Every gesture screams urgency and fear, contrasting with Margaret's calm orchestration. Scene 4. Alejandro, Valeria, and Marco enter. Interior. Alejandro, Valeria, and Marco's offices. Each receives emails from Margaret detailing Tiffany's and Kevin's financial fraud. Their expressions are a mix of disbelief, anger, and resolve. The camera cuts between their faces and Margaret. Allies in place, evidence undeniable. The balance of power had shifted silently, irrevocably. Those who once ignored my presence now depended on me to illuminate the truth. And illuminate it I did. Medium shots of Alejandro shaking his head, Valeria clenching fists, Marco pacing. Each receives partial pieces of the puzzle, enough to destabilize Tiffany's confidence further. Subtle particle effects from ambient sunlight create depth and tension in the frame. They had underestimated me. They had ignored me. And now every ignored moment, every dismissive glance, every command unappreciated, came back to them multiplied. Scene 5. Kevin's realization. Interior. Kitchen. Kevin reviews his bank statements for the third time, horror spreading across his face. Tiffany stands behind him, wringing hands, phone forgotten. Over-the-shoulder shot shows Margaret's meticulously organized financial documentation emailed to all relevant parties. Kevin's oblivion had been his shield. But when the truth lands like a hammer, even the strongest illusions crack. He began to see, to understand. And the realization brought panic in its wake. He had ignored my labor, dismissed my presence, and now he faced consequences he could not escape. Close up. Kevin's trembling hand drops a receipt. Tiffany's face turns pale. Medium shot. Spilled groceries on the counter symbolize the disorder of their world, a visual metaphor for lost control. Scene 6. Psychological warfare escalates. Interior. Split-screen montage. Tiffany and Kevin panic. Alejandro confronts Tiffany with evidence. Valeria contacts banks. Marco threatens legal action. Margaret observes remotely, serene and calculating. Each scene is a masterclass in tension. Camera angles vary, POV top-down, close-ups of facial expressions and gestures. Their panic was my weapon. Their confusion my advantage. I did not shout, I did not threaten. I simply existed as a force they could not ignore, a presence they had once dismissed. And every move they made confirmed their helplessness, their vulnerability, their accountability. Camera. Close-ups of Tiffany biting her nails, Kevin pacing, Alejandro's stern gaze. Margaret's calm expression in the hotel suite reflects a storm she controls with precision. Warm light from the desk lamp contrasts with the cold winter outside, symbolizing her growing empowerment. The greatest victories are not loud. They are quiet, methodical, and utterly irreversible. Scene 7. Margaret's strategic moves continue. Interior. Hotel Business Center. Margaret sends more emails, schedules legal consultations, arranges evidence packages for family accountability. Each keystroke deliberate, each email precise. Medium shot. Her calm, confident expression dominates the screen, eyes reflecting city lights through the window. Every detail mattered. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence carefully curated. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about clarity, about justice, about reclaiming a life that had been stolen piece by piece. And they were about to feel the weight of all those years. Close-up. Cursor hovering over send, then pressing it decisively. Slow pan to Margaret's face, a subtle smirk, eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. The room's ambient lighting highlights shadows and contours, creating cinematic tension. Scene 8. The calm before the storm. Interior. Hotel room night. Margaret sits alone, reviewing the responses from family members. Snow falls softly outside, reflecting city lights. She tilts her head back, breathes slowly and smiles faintly. The storm was coming. Chaos, panic, disarray, all meticulously orchestrated, all unfolding exactly as planned. And yet, I was calm. I was untouchable. I had prepared. I had waited, and now, I was ready for the moment of reckoning. POV shot from window. Snow-covered city, distant lights flickering. Medium shot. Margaret's hands tapped lightly on the table, almost rhythmically. Subtle particle effects from dust and snow enhanced cinematic depth. For 5 years I endured. For 5 years I served. For 5 years, I was invisible. But invisibility is a weapon. And tonight it would strike. Act 4. Confrontation and Justice. Scene 1. Christmas Eve arrival. Exterior. Snow gently falling on a quiet suburban street. Morning sunlight glints off icicles hanging from the roof. Margaret's silhouette approaches the house, key in hand. Wide establishing shot shows the calm of the morning contrasted with the chaos that will erupt inside. They thought they had survived the storm, that the chaos was temporary. But some storms have a final act, a reckoning. And I was that reckoning. Camera. Slow dolly tracking Margaret walking up the path. Close-up. Her boots crunching snow, hands gripping keys. POV shot from inside the window shows Tiffany and Kevin noticing her approach. Expressions frozen in dawning panic. For 5 years they dismissed me, belittled me, treated me as if I were invisible. Today they would see me clearly. And they would understand that invisibility can be the most formidable weapon of all. Scene 2. Crossing the threshold. Interior. Living room, decorated for Christmas. Gifts lie untouched under the tree. Tiffany glances at Kevin. Panic flits across their faces. Margaret enters the house calmly, deliberate, each step measured. Slow dolly shot toward her face captures the shift of power. The air changed the moment I stepped inside. A silence heavier than snow blanketed the room. I was no longer the servant. I was no longer ignored. I was the storm they could not escape. Close-up. Tiffany's widened eyes. Kevin's jaw tightens. Medium shot. Visiting family members exchange nervous glances, sensing a change in the household's dynamic. Scene 3. The lawyer arrives. Interior. Dining room. Robert, the family lawyer, enters carrying a briefcase. He sets it down on the table, pulling out notarized documents, financial records, and the will Margaret had prepared. Medium close-up on Tiffany as she begins to tremble. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives quietly, professionally, irrevocably. And in this quiet, the truth lands heavier than any scream. Camera. Close-ups of the documents. Highlighted debts, fraudulent loans, house ownership paperwork. Kevin leans forward, horror spreading across his face. The camera captures every micro-expression. Tiffany's panic, Kevin's dawning understanding, Margaret's calm authority. They had assumed they could manipulate, exploit, and deceive without consequence. They had assumed that silence was submission. They were wrong. Scene 4. Presenting the evidence. Interior, dining table medium shot. Margaret sits opposite Tiffany and Kevin. Alejandro, Valeria, Marco, and Evelyn stand strategically around the room, holding additional evidence. The camera alternates close-ups between faces to capture fear, regret, and disappointment. The truth is heavier than lies. It cannot be hidden. And when it is finally revealed, it crushes the illusions we cling to. Close-up. Margaret sliding a document toward Tiffany. Tiffany recoils slightly. Kevin looks down, guilt written across his face. Medium shot. Alejandro stern, Valeria resolute, Marco disappointed, Evelyn somber. Each body language speaks. For 5 years, they had taken what wasn't theirs. And now, every action, every debt, every deception, had a consequence. And I was the architect of their awakening. Scene 5. Tiffany's realization. Close-up. Tiffany's face contorts in panic, eyes darting to Kevin, then to Margaret. Her hands shake as she tries to form an excuse, but words fail. Camera focuses on her micro-expressions, guilt, fear, shame. Some people only understand when reality strikes. Tiffany's smile, her smirk, her subtle cruelty, evaporated under the weight of undeniable truth. She had underestimated me. And she would pay the price of that miscalculation. Camera. Slow pan over scattered documents on the table, symbolic props like abandoned coffee cups and gift boxes representing broken illusions. Scene 6. Kevin's guilt and dawning understanding. Medium shot. Kevin holds his head in hands, voice shaky, muttering apologies that Margaret doesn't immediately acknowledge. The camera lingers on his shoulders slumping, eyes widening in realization. Kevin had always been blind to my presence, blind to my labor, blind to my worth. But blindness is temporary. And when vision returns, it is often painful, humiliating, and inescapable. Close-up. Kevin looking at the documents, then at Margaret. His expression shifts from panic to shame, as if finally seeing the woman he had ignored for years. Scene 7. Legal authority solidified. Interior. Medium close-up of Robert signing documents with Margaret overseeing. Camera captures hands shaking slightly, pens scratching paper, stamps being pressed, finality achieved. Legal authority. Moral clarity. Justice delivered not with anger, but with precision. Every signature, every notarized page, every piece of evidence a silent declaration. The past was over, and the future was mine to reclaim. Close-up. Tiffany and Kevin staring, powerless. Margaret's calm expression reflects her inner triumph. Medium shot. Alejandro, Valeria, Marco, Evelyn witnessing the full reckoning. Their reactions a mix of solemn acknowledgement and restrained satisfaction. Scene 8. Family accountability. Interior. Wide shot of living room. Family members gather in small groups, holding evidence, discussing quietly. The camera captures symbolic elements. Overturned chairs, scattered papers, empty gift boxes, a toppled ornament. Visual metaphors for broken illusions. Accountability is a mirror. It forces reflection. It demands acknowledgement. And in that reflection, no lie can survive, no deception can persist. Each member of the family was forced to face their actions, their failures, their moral responsibility. Close-up. Alejandro sternly addressing Tiffany, Valeria holding the financial proof, Marco shaking his head in disappointment, Evelyn standing somberly. The tension is palpable, cinematic lighting casting long shadows across the room. Scene 9. Margaret's silent triumph. Interior. Margaret walks calmly through her home, touching surfaces as if reclaiming each moment lost. Snow falls softly outside. Wide shot. Margaret through the window, serene and composed, sunlight bathing her in warm, golden tones. For 5 years, I had been invisible. For 5 years, I had served. For 5 years, they had underestimated me. But now, I was visible. I was heard. I was in control. And I had reclaimed everything that had been mine. POV shot. Margaret's hand brushes over the polished dining table, lingering on documents and gifts now reordered. Medium close-up. Her subtle, satisfied smile. The room radiates warmth, empowerment, and closure. Scene 10. Moral clarity and resolution. Interior. Living room, panoramic view. Snow glistens outside, gentle light flooding the room. Margaret stands by the window, looking out contemplatively. Family members are subdued, acknowledging mistakes, understanding consequences. Justice need not be loud. Revenge need not be cruel. Sometimes strength is quiet, patience is powerful, and clarity is absolute. Today the house is mine, the truth is known, and I am free. The storm has passed, and in its wake dignity remains. Close-up. Margaret's eyes reflect calm triumph. Medium shot. Family members in various stages of remorse and reflection. Wide shot. The room serene, balanced, resolved. Act 5. Catharsis and liberation. Scene 1. Quiet morning after the storm. Exterior. Snow-covered front yard. Morning sunlight glints off freshly fallen snow. The house stands calm and serene. Wide establishing shot captures Margaret stepping onto the porch, inhaling the crisp winter air. Her expression relaxed and composed. The storm had passed. The chaos, the panic, the deception, all of it lay behind me. And in its absence, there was peace. Not the fleeting kind, not the fragile kind, but the deep, steady calm that comes when justice is done and dignity is reclaimed. Camera. Medium shot of Margaret's face, sunlight illuminating her features. Micro expression, subtle smile, eyes glistening with relief and satisfaction. POV shot from behind her, looking over the snowy yard, symbolizing a new beginning. Scene 2. Walking through her home. Interior. Wide shot of the living room. The space is orderly yet lived in. Margaret walks slowly through the house, her fingers brushing over surfaces. Polished dining table, organized gifts, neat kitchen counters. For 5 years, these walls had echoed with unspoken frustration, unseen labor, and quiet despair. Now, every corner, every surface, belonged to me. Not just by law, but by the clarity of truth, by the power of patience, by the certainty of justice. Close-ups. Margaret's hands touch a polished wooden table, then a windowsill dusted with snow. Medium shot. She pauses, looks at the Christmas tree, appreciating the calm, unbroken peace she has created. Scene 3. Family subdued presence. Interior. Family members gather in small groups, subdued, reflective. Tiffany sits quietly, Kevin standing pensively, Alejandro, Valeria, Marco, and Evelyn observing with measured understanding. Some lessons cannot be taught with words. They must be lived. And now, in the quiet aftermath, every face reflected acknowledgement, remorse, and the subtle understanding that actions have consequences. Camera. Close-ups on Tiffany's pale, thoughtful face, Kevin's downcast eyes, Marco shaking his head with regret, Valeria holding the documents firmly, Alejandro's stern but approving nod. Subtle particle effects of snow drifting past the window enhance cinematic depth. Scene 4. Symbolic victory. Interior. Living room. Margaret stands by the window, looking out at softly falling snow. Camera slowly circles her, highlighting the warmth of sunlight against the cool tones of the snow outside. Victory is not loud. It is silent. It is measured. It is knowing that you have endured, that you have risen, that you have reclaimed what was stolen. Not with cruelty, but with patience, precision, and unwavering resolve. POV shot. Margaret's eyes track the falling snowflakes, serene focus. Close-up. Her slight, confident smile, reflecting liberation, empowerment, and inner peace. Scene 5. Reflecting on the journey. Interior. Study room. Margaret sits at a desk, pen in hand, writing a personal journal. Sunlight filters through the window, illuminating her calm face. The camera captures her thoughtful gaze, subtle micro-expressions of contentment and triumph. For 5 years I was invisible. For 5 years I endured. For 5 years, I waited. And in that waiting, I found strength. In that patience, I found strategy. In that silence, I found clarity. And now, I am seen. I am heard. I am whole. Medium close-up. Pen moves deliberately across paper. Wide shot. Room bathed in golden morning light, symbolic of moral resolution and renewal. Scene 6. Embracing liberation. Exterior. Porch view. Margaret steps outside, arms slightly extended, taking in the crisp air. Snowflakes settle on her shoulders. Medium shot. Serene, empowering stance, confident posture, soft smile. Freedom is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of clarity, justice, and self-respect. Today, I walk freely, not burdened by the weight of manipulation or deception, but empowered by the strength I discovered within myself. Camera. Wide shot. Margaret alone on the snowy porch, sun reflecting off snow, creating cinematic lens flares. The house behind her stands calm, a symbol of reclaimed space and authority. Scene 7. Symbolic closure. Interior, living room. Margaret places a final document on the desk, a letter addressed to Tiffany and Kevin, a calm but undeniable assertion of accountability. She turns, looking around the room one last time. Justice does not need to shout. It does not need to humiliate. It simply exists. And in its existence, peace follows. Lessons are learned, truths are known, and dignity finally is restored. Close-up. Margaret's hand placing the letter down with deliberate calm. Medium shot. She walks toward the window, silhouette framed against soft, golden light. Micro-expression. Subtle satisfaction, reflective relief. Scene 8. Closing moment, serenity achieved. Exterior. Wide shot of snowy neighborhood. Margaret stands on her porch, looking out. The camera slowly pulls back to show the house enveloped in soft snow, quiet and serene.